Media Dialogues in 2022.
Hi, welcome to Media Dialogues. On the show today, we'll assess Twitter's relevance to advertisers. After the tweet-by-tweet build-up of will he, can he, should he, Elon Musk has bought Twitter for a mind-blowing $44 billion. Since then, the world's agog, not least because Musk is tweeting every new thought as it occurs to him on what he's planning to do with the influential social media platform. A free speech absolutist who wants to increase reach and get on more users, he is likely to change Twitter irrevocably. So what are brands and advertisers who contribute to the lion's share of Twitter revenues make of what's going on? How relevant is Twitter really as an advertising medium? Can Musk rely on ad revenues to grow? Will he change how Twitter works, the business model that it uses? My guests will have a lot to say. Please welcome Shantanu Sirohi, co-founder and COO Interactive Avenues of the IPG Group, Amaresh Godbole, CEO of the digital technology business at the Publicis Group, and Manish Maheshwari, founder and CEO of Invact Metaversity, also the man who till just very recently was in that hot seat leading Twitter India. Manish, I'm going to have to start with you. First of all, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you, Anuradha, for having me on your show.
And are you happy that you're not at Twitter India now with Elon Musk tweeting what's going to be happening to the company, one tweet at a time, almost every 8-hour cycles?
Well, I left Twitter India quite some time ago. I know, if you remember, I was transferred from India to the US. So I was in Twitter US. And then, of course, I left Twitter last year.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, if I had stayed in Twitter US, life would have been very exciting. But my life is still even more exciting at this point in time as an entrepreneur. So no regrets, I think. But it's good to watch all this action as an outsider, just as you are watching. The only difference here is that I have, more perspective. Having been there and having been part of the company, I can share better perspective. But other than that, I am learning about this from Twitter and from Elon as he's tweeting his thoughts every day, just as you are learning. Yeah.
I saw you tweet that picture and commiserations to Parag Agarwal. Has it become tougher to manage Twitter?
Well, I mean, if you think about it, like anyone who is in a CEO's position at this point in time, it's a tough act, right? On one side, you have to keep the company going on its plan, and I think you have the entire employees to manage. At the same time, everyone knows that the management is changing, and there is a deal which is very likely to happen, right? Of course, I won't say 100% certain, but I think very likely to happen.
Right.
So clearly, Parag as the CEO right now is in a tough spot because he has to manage quite a few, different stakeholders and still come out as a fair person. And I think that's why I tweeted about the fact that my heart goes out to him at this point in time, given that, when I was there, I had some very good relationship with him, cordial working relationship, and we had met a couple of times. In fact, he had visited India as well when I was in India at that point in time. So both of us also had spent some time together. So therefore, I sent that tweet out.
$44 billion is the price tag that Elon Musk has put on Twitter. This is not a vanity project. And yes, it doesn't even seem like a great direct business proposition. So this is more about what Elon Musk thinks is Twitter's role and via Twitter, his role in the world, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I'm also trying to analyze, right? Is it a mission-driven purchase or is it like a business purchase, right? And I think I am getting both signals, right? So it's probably driven by both. I think on the mission side, I mean, it is not unheard of rich, powerful people owning large media companies, be it Wall Street Journal or be it Washington Post. He has been talking about free speech and the fact that people on both the sides should be equally unhappy. And then he also has been tweeting about his reservations about the content moderation policies. So that led me to believe that, yes, he does have an agenda and he has a point of view, which he would want to get implemented once he joins. On the other side, I also see that he tweeting about this platform as a platform where more value can be unlocked. I mean, he does talk about the fact that Twitter has a lot of value, but it is currently locked. And it is not at its full optimum way of running, right? And things can be improved there. At the end of the day, I think Elon is also a business person. He owns companies. He has run companies. He has run companies successfully. He has made companies profitable. So if he's spending $44 billion and clearly part funded by his own money and part taken as a loan, he would have to continue this as a business. He can't just change it overnight and still expect the value to last, right? At the same time, my view is that ideologically, Elon and Jack seem to be close to me. And I think Jack was always not that excited about the ad-driven model. I think my sense was that if there could be an alternate way to monetize, they would have happily chosen that.
Right.
Now, what I noticed from the recent tweets from Elon is that he is looking at a model where businesses and other important people who leverage Twitter to pay some kind of subscription amount while it is free for the remaining ones. And he is moving to that kind of a direction, right? And if you step back and think about it, what's the thinking there, right? If you look at other platforms like, say, Instagram or Facebook, they have tremendous reach, right? So you're monetizing the reach. And a great way to monetize the reach is advertisement. But Twitter is not a reach platform. Twitter is an influence platform. It's an influence platform, right? It is the platform where narratives are built, where opinions are shaped. So it is the platform for the influential people. And by definition, there's only going to be a limited number of influential people. So the amount of reach you can get from this platform is not going to be as much as the reach of the other platforms. Therefore, advertising based on reach is never going to scale beyond a point. And I think he's smart enough to realize that. I mean, this has been some discussions around that in the company as well, but clearly he has come out very strongly on that one, saying we have to look for other ways of monetizing. And I think the other ways could include subscription, charging people like, businesses using Twitter should be paying for it. And then maybe think tanks and sort of bodies that want to mobilize public opinion.
Do you see the Ministry of External Affairs pay for its Twitter presence or the Prime Minister's office?
Well, I can't comment on that. I mean, we have to wait and watch because, I mean, nothing is in my control now. Yeah.
Manish,
so that's where things are.
Yeah. Manish, let me just quickly get in Shantanu. I know that everybody, whether you're digital experts or advertisers or media buyers and planners, everybody's interested in this great disruption that has been announced by Elon Musk in his act of buying Twitter. What do you make of it as someone who uses it? And do you see Twitter change very dramatically as a result of his ownership?
So one is, it's not a vanity project. It is, there has to be economics behind it. In absolute terms, it is a 10x multiple that he's paid. As he moves away from just talking about absolute free speech, etc., when you see he's talking a little more, it's getting down to saying, hey, here's a platform. Maybe we shouldn't look at it like other social media platforms. There are a bunch of things which are probably wrong with it. The trolling, the fact that things are not always transparent on what's getting promoted and what's not. So rich people owning powerful media and, pivoting it away maybe from its current way of generating revenue. And finally, he's saying that I want people to engage, people to interact, people to
he very
get
categorically
entertained.
says that he wants to increase users, he wants to be more inclusive and get people on board, right?
Yes.
So that seems to be, he wants to increase reach. Manish just mentioned reach. It's not a reach platform. But interestingly, he's also wanting to increase reach.
So if that's the plan, then there are multiple other things that will need to be done. For instance, if you look at the India numbers, for instance, 40, 50 million odd people, it doesn't really cut too much in terms of absolute reach, considering that we are 650 million, but it will need something else to get there, because there is the thing about language. So where is the next billion user going to come from? What's the language they speak? Is it well poised for that? On monetization from other sources or monetization from the people who are the power users there, I'm not so sure about that.
Okay, let me get Amaresh in here. Amaresh, do you see disruption at the back end also? Because we've again heard statements made by Elon Musk about opening up the algorithms, open sourcing it, going after spam bots, so many different things. Is this going to be a big disruption, and how does Twitter compare now with the other social media, tech media, and how will it compare post-Musk, before and after Musk, if you will?
So I think I'll take the second part first, which is
Sure.
how does it compare with some of the other social
Yeah.
media platforms, right? So if you look at Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, those are great for reach that Manish was referring
Yeah.
to. So you can do high impact campaigns over there, whether it's video, static, whatever. Google search and some of the affiliated products are great for performance, which is bottom of the funnel conversion, where you want to get people to install apps and things like that. What Twitter actually does is culture shaping, right? It's an influence platform like Manish referred to. And I think sometimes we actually do it a disservice as media or as brands, where we're trying to evaluate it apples to apples against some of these platforms. Because what Twitter can do for a brand is shape the conversation at a cultural level, vis-a-vis at an advertising level. And I think there is power in technology to help Twitter monetize that. So for example, a lot of the impact that Twitter generates is actually outside the platform. You've got news channels and other people, picking up on tweets and amplifying them. Currently, there's no way for Twitter to be able to, stake claim over there. So apart from managing bots and things, what if they could use machine learning to actually go and, do a daily scan of how much impact they've created outside the platform? And that kind of technology, if you try to build it in-house, it's a massive investment. So one of the benefits of open sourcing code like that could be to say that, I'll open it up to the community to help me monetize my platform, which takes a big mental shift. And that can't happen with the current structure of Twitter, because they're all about, governing within their councils and the way they approach things. And maybe that's where it's coming from, right? So, for example, Michael Dell took Dell private so that, he could pivot and bring it back.
Yeah.
And I'm guessing that's what it's going to be. And you only take it private because you want to change things and steer them completely.
So, Manish, how big a disruption will it be at the back end and, structurally, systemically at Twitter, some of the announcements that are coming out from Elon Musk in terms of the way things will be managed?
Yeah, I think there will be disruptions at three levels in my mind. One would be around content moderation and the policy team. That's what I see, given that there is going to be a change in the way that is being done. The second disruption could come in the ad sales teams. I mean, there is a large ad sales teams as well, depending on how much importance given to ad sales. And the third is about on the engineering side of if things are going to be open sourced, and I think those discussions are going on, as far as I understand, following people's tweet threads, right? There was a project called Blue Sky that was started a couple of years ago, which was all about bringing algorithmic transparency and making it public about and let people decide what algorithm they want to choose to design their the feed, right? Whatever you see on your Twitter timeline, rather than the company deciding for you, can you choose the algorithm that will then decide? So company becomes a repository of all the thoughts. And then the algorithm that you choose then determines the filtering and the priority of that. And that is a very interesting thought, right?
And that's greater control for the user, right? That would imply that.
More choice and more control for the user. And it also means loss of power on part of the company to decide who sees what.
Right.
And that will then have a downstream impact on the time spent on the platform, the engagement, and also the monetization rate as well. Having said that, it could work in the advantage as well. So I think those tests would be conducted, my sense would be with far more vigor and with far more urgency now. And also the fact that it is being taken private allows the company now to take bolder steps that they do not have to justify to the Wall Street. And I think making it private allows one to do that. That was not possible earlier.
Let's take a look at some of the things that advertisers in India have used Twitter for. You mentioned, Amaresh, so did Manish, about cultural engagement and the cultural narrative that Twitter allows or enables. But having said that, is it fleeting? I know you said metrics are, measurement is difficult, but is it fleeting? And is it in the when it is in the conversation space and when it is about culture shaping? Do brands really on Twitter, do you have any instances where you can say that, okay, this is where a brand has got integrated into the cultural narrative in a conversation and has then had a positive, rub off from?
I mean, a brand that has used Twitter well on a light-hearted note and become a part of culture, I think, is Netflix, right? Because they have the kind of content that is naturally culture-shaping. Twitter as a platform works beautifully for them. I think at a public service level, more than a brand, I would think the most powerful use case that I've seen for Twitter in the last year was when we had the second wave of the pandemic. And it actually became a helpline for people.
Yes.
And as it became a helpline for people, brands and institutions who were trying to help from the outside realized they could jump in and actually, participate in that. So it wasn't owned by any single person. But those are great instances of what can happen with this platform, right? And I think that's where brands need to learn from, saying that it shouldn't. Right now, I think the way brands use it is saying, oh, I have a launch event, let me use Twitter.
Yeah, because
right?
it's then in the
It's
information
tactical.
space, and it's still in the information space, right?
Absolutely.
It's new, it's news, launch, information. So it's still in that zone. And is that okay? I mean, is that okay when in your media plan? How relevant would that be?
So I personally believe that Twitter is probably the most under-leveraged platform, not because people are not putting enough money on it as advertisers, but because we are putting money in the wrong direction as advertisers. And not wrong direction, it's something that, as an industry, we've been used to, right? Saying that if you could put money on advertising, it's towards impact or reach or whatever. But when it comes to Twitter, I believe starting with Twitter educating the media industry and the media industry educating clients, we need to shift the measurement towards earned media. Because that's one of the proxies for what is the conversation you're generating, right?
What does that mean?
So what are the level of conversations that are generated in other media? What is the value of those conversations? So if CNBC covered it for me, what is the value of the conversation that CNBC show, does, and how do I attribute it back to Twitter? And that way Twitter can monetize better, and I'm evaluating it for what it can do for me. If I had to put numbers to it.
Sure. Yeah, you will have to put numbers to it, isn't it? That's what you guys do. Shantanu, what more can Twitter do? How is it being used? And then I'll take it back to Manish.
Yeah. So let's talk about the good first. We run the social media for Rajasthan Royals, the IPL team.
Yeah.
And there's the Twitter admin that we've created and we manage, and there's content that goes out, live tweeting, live creation of content during, tactical times while a game is going on. And it's very nice to see that a lot of that gets picked up and goes all over the internet, right? So you say something broke the internet, some meme broke the internet, or some trend broke the internet. That happens very regularly and purely organically. So that's a great example of what Twitter can do for you. It's an engagement platform for a large bunch of your fans and to connect with them. It's fantastic there. At the other end of the spectrum is everything that's wrong with the platform too. I mean, we can't shy away from that. So there are the trolls, there are the bots, there is the fact that, hey, Twitter is actually a vanity number, a vanity metric that you'll drive, right? My launch was trending on Twitter for 6 hours or 1 day or whatever. And all that takes is some unscrupulous agencies and very, very little money. So there's nothing that's actually happening for the brand
wanting
there.
greater transparency and minimizing the role of bots and all of that is something that would apply to all the other digital tech media as well, isn't it? It's not just something that is Twitter's problem. It is something that you could say YouTube and Google also, you have to just take their word for it, isn't it? And that can, their views, etc., can also be manipulated in that sense.
Let me get that right. Twitter has been the most open social media channel in a way, in terms of there's nothing dark there. It's a town square, right?
Sure.
So they've always had the APIs open. You are able to pull out historically whatever is being said and so on and so forth. Which some of the other social media channels don't allow you to do, right? There are their walled gardens there. But having said that, the challenge of trolling and the challenge of misinformation and how it can get spread is more easily manipulated on the open Twitter platform currently. So Elon saying he's going to fix that, sure, it's a known problem. It's a problem that's existed for a while.
And that will make it more
needs to get
attractive
fixed.
to advertisers and brands?
It would. It would. And also more meaningful metrics. He was saying all the right things when we're saying that, hey, it's not just what happened on the platform, but what's the metric coming in there?
Sure.
Right.
Manish, you've spent, 3 years trying to, evangelize Twitter and get brands on board, working closely with some very, very iconic brands to use Twitter. What was your experience about how Indian advertisers were using Twitter, and what were some of the gaps, need gaps that you noticed and which you think Twitter could go ahead and address?
Yeah. So To answer your first question first, which is which are the brands which have been leveraging Twitter quite well? I think brands that understand the cultural norms and are the vanguard in terms of shaping the cultural zeitgeist of the country, right? Those are the brands which do really well on Twitter. I think one of the examples that was given was Netflix. Yes, I mean, when the entire movement happened from stardom to fandom and fans were to be celebrated, Netflix was front and center of that campaign on Twitter. The other examples I would say is Spotify does a very good job in terms of really engaging people on Twitter, and those campaigns are done really well. The other one I can think about is in automotive, I can think about Uber leveraging it, the whole women safety campaign they did after the issues they faced in Delhi earlier. They really came down with this whole women safety and campaign. They ran that on Twitter. So if you industry after industry, right? I mean, the same you can look at.
So what are the need gaps? What are the need gaps, Manish? Whether it is the advertisers understanding the medium more, or Twitter and what it offers in terms of all the different mechanisms that are there.
Yeah, I think it's going to be on both sides. I think Twitter will have to do a better job in terms of explaining its value proposition and the right way to measure its success. At the same time, advertisers also have to evolve their thinking beyond just looking at the reach numbers and comparing it to any other platform, because this is not a reach platform in the shape it is right now. It is an influence platform. So advertisers have to understand that I'm going to be on Twitter because I want to be seen as the leader in this category. I want to shape the narrative. I want to define the culture, and I want to shape it, and I want to be seen in that light as well. And the people I would connect with would be the influencers, and the people, like if you look at a conversation table, these are the people who are the most vocal on a dining table, right? Yeah. These are the people who shape the narrative if you're sitting in a town hall.
Right.
So that's how they have to look at it. Twitter, on the other hand, would also have to do a lot more in terms of explain the value proposition. And as I think one of the panelists just mentioned, also quantify it and also share with them what is the value they are getting and how should we measure
this.
Right.
Manish, I'm sorry, I'm going to have to just go quickly to a last question because I'm running out of time. And that is common to each one of you. Do you see, what role do you see India play for Twitter in its journey forward? Quick question, Manish, and then same question for all of you.
My view is India is going to be very important because I think any Bay Area company looks at India as the country to drive their growth. And I think a lot of users are yet to be reached in India through Twitter. So I think there's a lot of upside and growth. At the same time, India is a very complex democracy, right? And if you want to talk about your content policies and all the other changes you are doing, you have to test it in India and see it is ready for India or not. Because while we are one country, every state is different. Every language is different. Everything about India is so unique that there is no other country in the world that can even compare to it. I mean, forget the advertiser side. Even just running the platform successfully and calling it a success would require a company to overinvest on a country like India and really getting it right there. And then they would have the license to operate successfully commercially as well. Right. So that's how I look at it. So India has always been important. And I think India will continue to be very important as far as I can see into the future.
No, great insight, Manish. Shantanu, quick word.
I have a contrarian view on that. In our estimates, India accounts for less than $20 million in terms of total advertising dollar that
Twitter would get.
And it's a very, very complex ecosystem to crack. I think it's still first world. Twitter is essentially a first world platform. And if they get their things right, there is where it's going to play. India, in the short term, I don't see any great impact, positive or negative.
Interesting. Amaresh?
From a user's perspective, I think it's access, because in a populated country like ours, many services slow down. So, if I'm stuck today, I can tweet at the BMC or someone else, and even if there's no structural change, I can solve an individual problem. From Twitter's perspective, I think it's definitely a user market. So the way Facebook, Google, etc. look at it, where they've got 300, 400 million users, I think there's an investment that needs to be made in saying, I won't get revenue, but I'll get a user base out of this country.
I didn't even get into, Manish, whether Twitter is ready for the metaverse and what's happening there, because conversation has shifted there and you're at the leading edge of that, isn't it? But I'll bring that up later on another episode maybe. But for now, just remember everything you heard and what is going to happen at Twitter next, you will probably hear first on Twitter. So stay tuned. tuned there, and of course to CNBC TV18 to make sense of what you hear there. Thank you, everybody. Manish, Shantanu, Amaresh for joining us. And catch us next week for another conversation.
Media Dialogues in 2022.